Video game prototypes are an interesting topic when it comes to gaming in general, where some prototypes might become lost media forever with only small hints of it actually existing. Others can take years upon years to finally float to the surface for the public. It's not often that you see a prototype for a game that was never released to ever go up for sale, but for those that search the internet day in and day out, sometimes you get lucky. This is obviously not a normal 3DS cartridge. If you're anywhere in the collecting scene or know anything about video game development, then you would have at least some knowledge to know that this is a development cartridge for the 3DS. But what is a development cartridge? Pretty much, when video game developers were developing games for a certain console, say for the 3DS in this instance, then there were chances that prototypes for new games or earlier versions of final games were on one of these cartridges in its lifespan. Nowadays, a lot of dev cartridge or prototype games are kind of sought after as they're seen as a huge part in preserving video game history, and they're also just kind of cool to have as a collector. This one in particular has a very interesting story behind it, because this is a story of a Nintendo 3DS game that never saw the light of day. Until now. Back in 2009, Blue Tongue Entertainment under the once beloved video game company THQ was tasked in making a video game reminiscent of Super Smash Bros. But instead of famous video game IPs, this game would include world famous wrestlers from the WWE. At the time, 2 WWE spin-offs were in development. The first one being WWE All-Stars, which was actually released across multiple systems in 2011, and the second spin-off being WWE Brawl. What's known about this game is very little, as only a select amount of screenshots or videos were ever shared, but what is known about it is that, like All-Stars, Brawl was going to be released on multiple systems as well. There was actually a trailer for the game released on a WWE Online article showcasing the game on Xbox. We can see that this game was actually going to follow a different art style and have an entirely different style of gameplay that seems to be set in destructive 3D stages with their own unique environments. Because Blue Tongue Entertainment had never worked on a WWE game prior to this opportunity, they decided to give these wrestlers a little bit more of an imaginative background to kind of build up their uniqueness in the game. This can really be seen in concept arts for the game, where John Cena has an auto mechanic look, The Miz has this Hollywood mogul look, and The Undertaker has this dark, sinister look to him. And just hold on, because I will get to the gameplay after this. WWE Brawl was actually announced that it was in development and was also brought to conventions to show off a bit. And apparently, according to someone that actually worked at THQ at the time, as they were supervising the console version of this game, they had no idea that a 3DS port was ever in the works. Sadly, WWE Brawl would never see the light of day and would ultimately be cancelled, as THQ would begin to face financial troubles in 2011. It is said that at the time, Brawl was already 6 months to a year away from being completely ready for release. So while the game has had videos showing off gameplay for the Xbox, its gameplay for the 3DS has never ever been shown. And just a quick shout out to these people, because these are my sources for all of this information. Seriously, thanks to these guys. This is a lot of information to go through, and this actually helped me a lot. Here is what's on the WWE Brawl 3DS prototype cartridge. We can see that the game actually doesn't even have a real name or banner within the 3DS menu. But if we start the application up, we are greeted with a few developer splash screens. And finally, the menu screen. And let's just listen to this music for a quick second, cause man, this is some banging WWE music. Now, before getting into the actual game, keep in mind that this is a very bare bones prototype, as you can see that there are only 2 menu selections: Game Start and Sound Test. The sound test option just has options for sound, music, and voices. Sadly, this version doesn't actually have any voices in it, so it is kind of a bust. Going into the game start option, this is where things really start to get good. In the character selection screen, we seem to have 12 playable characters and 4 locked characters. In order, we have John Cena, Rey Mysterio, The Miz, Undertaker, Big Show, Triple H, Kofi Kingston, Sheamus, Randy Orton, Kane, Sergeant Slaughter, and R-Truth. When I go to click on the locked characters, nothing shows up, but I actually managed to get pretty deep in game files, so I'll show that off a bit later. It seems like in this version, you can pick up to 4 fighters to brawl within a free-for-all match. And next up, we get to the stage selection screen. Sadly, we're hit with even more locked stages, but from the ones we do have, it seems like there's a practice stage, some weird generator stage, and a hotel lobby stage. Going through the practice stage, it's exactly what you'd expect from a practice stage. There are crates for weapons though, so that's pretty cool, I guess. The generator stage is a pretty big stage that has this giant machine in the middle that becomes a hazard every so often. If you get in its way, it actually shocks you. There are these little green bullet things that are shot out from the main floor of this stage as well, and there are conveyor belts all around this map which pull you all over. Overall, because of this stage's size, it reminds me a lot of a Super Smash Bros. Level, I guess because of all the things that are just going on all at once. Pretty cool setting nonetheless. And the last stage, which is probably the best stage on this cartridge, is the hotel lobby stage, because not only are you able to brawl within just the first little level of this lobby, if you wait long enough, an arrow directs you to get into the elevator, which triggers the second part of this stage. Now, this is the reason why I feel like this stage is the coolest, because not only are you able to brawl it out on the first floor, you can also brawl it out in an elevator, but if you wait even longer for the elevator to reach its destination, you're greeted with the third part of this stage. Now, because of this, I was curious to know if that last generator stage had anything like this, but sadly, after waiting around long enough, there wasn't really anything, so it seems like this was the only real finished map for this prototype. The third part of this stage seems to take you up to some sort of rooftop lounge area which has a spaceship come down and shoot lasers. I think it's pretty interesting to see that stage hazards were going to be something part of each stage. I really don't know what the point of the spaceship was though. Very cool nonetheless. Next up, I wanted to show off each of the wrestlers because although it seems like they all follow the same fighting animations, their appearances in this sort of cartoon game style look so good. It sucks to see that so much time and effort was put into this game only for it to be entirely scrapped. Judging by these models, you can tell that a lot of work went into making each of these wrestlers unique. Seeing how some of them can be as normal as a human wrestler, all the way to some of them being mythical beings with special powers gives this game such a nice twist. It does sadden me a bit to see that they all follow the same fighting animations like I said earlier, because imagine if I was able to show off some of their special abilities. On the bottom screen, there are 3 WWE Championship belts that act as specials when you build up enough hits. Sadly, like most other things, they're all generic and none of them are unique to any of the fighters, so all there is this revenge attack, minor adrenaline, and then the major adrenaline, which I'm guessing would of course have a big special move that involves something with the character's background and who they are. And honestly, just playing around trying to get footage for this was really making me want more and more of this game. Although I was having a good time, I was also kind of feeling a bit sad knowing that this game would never be looked at again. I was genuinely having a good time connecting combos and just throwing items at opponents. But as I kept playing, I was also becoming a bit more and more curious, wondering if I was able to get behind those locked stages and locked characters. And thanks to the help of a recent friend I've made, I was actually able to find some leftover files in the raw game data. So after doing some research with some 3DS applications, I was able to find out that there were actually a couple more stages on this cartridge that are possibly locked away on the stage selection screen. It turns out that out of the 3 we already had visible, the practice map was definitely the first one we had shown. The generator map I had shown was actually part of a 4-part stage which seemed to have brought you all the way up to a penthouse suite. Now that definitely would have been cool to see. And lastly, the hotel map was actually called the SmackDown Hotel. The other 2 maps that we have listed here are the sample map, which just seems like it's another practice map, nothing too special about it, and the subway map. This one is interesting because back in the Xbox gameplay videos, this map was actually shown to just have the street floor battling area, as there was never actually any footage of the bottom half of this map being shown. It is interesting to see that the developers had different parts of each stage in mind, making the game flow just a bit better, and not being a standard fighting game. Overall, pretty cool to see that somehow there could have been more maps to play on this cartridge alone. What's even cooler is that 3 of the fighters actually had unique animations set for themselves, which I'll quickly run through because going through every animation would take a bit longer. John Cena has his famous "you can't see me" animation. The Miz has this sort of smug pose where he's kind of showing himself off. And The Undertaker has this menacing aura with his head tilted down within each one of his stances. So after looking through all the maps and all the models, I still wanted to know if there were any sort of leftover game files signifying who the locked characters were going to be on this cartridge. And it just so happened that I managed to find them. Using a different application, as I was searching around through some more files, I saw files of all the wrestlers listed out in alphabetical order and noticed that there were a few names I had not seen inside the actual game. And if you know anything about wrestling, then these names might look very familiar to you. Because after looking at these files, these were already winning text graphics for Andre the Giant, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, Kelly Kelly, Mr. McMahon, and The Rock. So at this point, I wanted to search even deeper to see if they had any more graphics hidden away somewhere in the cartridge, and although sadly I wasn't able to find any, I did manage to find these 2 character select screens for Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon, which are also just concept arts for the game, so they're not that big of a deal. And pretty much that's it. That's all I could find for this 3DS prototype game. It is very sad to see that WWE Brawl had so much effort and passion put into it, because even now, almost 13 years later after this game was said to be released, so many people look back at the old concept arts and videos wishing that this game would have had at launch. Definitely a cool piece of 3DS history that I'm glad finally has some closure.